us why you founded Alfred and the mission of the company today.
That's an easy one. So when Jess and I were working long hours and building our careers, one thing we thought about was how do we make the places that we live in anticipate and support us? And that ultimately that was a way to keep more women in the workforce. And that vision has evolved a lot to really thinking about housing as a whole. And for us, Alfred is really about making housing focused on the consumer, putting the resident at the center of the value chain. And today, housing is the largest asset class in the world and therefore should be the largest consumer product. But it's really lacking in terms of a branded experience, real technology, and a focus on the consumer as the end user. So we're excited to disrupt and evolve the industry with industry players and to give renters more for their rent check.
Now, the idea of tech-enabled property management is getting a lot of attention because, of course, Adam Neumann just got this big check. Before we go there, why do you think this is such a big opportunity, Jessica?
So I think that housing is one of the largest opportunities we have, both because of the lives that it hits, right? All of us consume housing, and no one's ever looked at it as a consumer product. And at the same time, I think housing is in crisis. If we look at the asking rents in most markets right now, they're 70% higher than they were for what's being paid. And we also have a housing supply problem. We need to build 5 million more apartments to meet the demand for housing. So given the impact that it can have on people's lives and the challenges facing it, I think it is ripe for a lot of attention and a lot of investment and a vision for what it can be.
Jessica, as Emily just alluded to, there is, a lot of noise around this space at the moment, partly because of what Mr. Neumann has just announced with his new venture, Flow. He had a relationship that previously existed, or maybe still exists, with Alfred and with you guys as founders. Talk to us a little bit about that, how you got to know him and his family office, and how that relationship really came to be in the first place.
So at Alfred, we've always taken a very collaborative approach for building our business. And that started, 8 years ago when we started working with our initial landlords and partners. And among our partners, we don't only count Adam, but we count Greystar and Invesco and our venture capital partners, NEA and Spark. And I think the key from our perspective has been to build a business by working with the best in the industry and doing that bottoms up. And that means being part of a broad ecosystem and seeking out people in that ecosystem that see something very similar to you and want to have a hand in building that future. So that's the approach we've taken for the history of how we've built the company, and is very much for how we met Adam.
And obviously, Alfred has its own product, a unique product. We've just talked about this idea of owning the future of living. What is it that Alfred does that is sort of unique and gives it some protection against new competitors potentially coming into the space and looking to disrupt residential real estate in a similar way?
So Ed, if you look at the apartment space in particular, which is where most of us are actually living, and renters, in fact, are going to be the majority of home dwellers in the future instead of homeowners. So multifamily really hasn't evolved since the invention of the elevator. That is like the biggest innovation that's had the opportunity to disrupt the space. And the reason why we believe that real estate, specifically residential, has been so resistant to disruption, today it takes only 1% of its budget and applies that towards technology, is because it's incredibly fractured. So to make a change, you can't just attack one part of the problem. You have to look at the entire value chain, and you have to align stakeholders in new ways that create value for everyone. So for us, what Alfred does that's so unique, we are the only prop tech company that's ever first really focused on the resident. We started with home management. We earned the right and the trust of consumers to provide services into the home. We then acquired a company that allowed us to build technology and automate the management of a full building. We then acquired a property manager that gives us full understanding what it takes to drive an asset. And so what we're able to do when we put those three things together, which are very different businesses, but we create a flywheel. And we treat the consumer like they're the king. We add efficiencies with technology. We automate the entire resident experience from signing your lease, paying your rent, booking an amenity, booking a Peloton. And it doesn't hurt that we make the owner more money, but we also make the neighborhood around the building more vibrant. We bring services into buildings, and we really think about real estate as it's not just about the rent check. It's about looking at retail at looking at the building itself as a retail center for lifestyle and gaining access to the consumer wallet. So we're expanding the pie for everyone, we're changing the value chain, and we're doing that because we have these different core competencies that have taken us 8 years of really hard work and evolution, building by building, shareholder by shareholder, building. Like, we have 150,000 units on our platform in 52 cities across North America and US and Canada. And we're really proud of the resilience we've had to be able to build what we believe will be a generation-defining company.
So Forbes has done some reporting on your experience with Adam Neumann and how his relationship with the company changed over the last couple of years. His representatives say he believes that the article is inaccurate and that he and his family office still support the company. What's your response to that and your assessment of this reporting?
So it's a great question, and I think a lot of people are asking probably similar questions. But the thing that I think is important is not necessarily what's accurate from a reporting perspective. It's what are we really focused on building, and what have we done already to get us to this place? I think that this is a huge market, and a lot of people see the opportunity here. And that is something worth investing behind and investing in. And as Marcela said, the thing that we're really focused on at Alfred is what we've built today and where we want to take this in the future. We've only scratched the surface of what's possible in this market. We have 150,000 units, but that is small compared to the overall market size, not just in the US, but globally. And I think that's really where we should focus the conversation and bring the resources, whether they are part of our company or part of other companies, to bear in solving what housing can be in the future.
That said, Mark Andreessen wrote in a blog post that Flow aims to build, quote, the future of living. And if you look at your website on the homepage, it says, welcome to the future of living. I know that that can mean a lot of things, but how do you feel about that? And do you believe there's a conflict of interest here?
Andreessen is a storied firm and a fantastic investor, and we're excited about the attention that they're bringing to the space, obviously with the largest check they've ever written. We have raised ourselves $100 million over 8 years, and there is a difference between those two numbers. And we do see the opportunity to continue to expand to our investor set. But I don't want to comment on other businesses as much as I really want to focus the conversation on ours.
Marcela, just on the question of funding, and look, obviously, Andreessen has put in a very large amount of money now into this space, which suggests they have serious appetite here. Have you guys, as Alfred, had a conversation with them about getting backing? Is it something you would now look to do? Clearly, as I say, they are very interested in the space.
Yeah. So, we have lots of investors. We're talking to lots of investors. But one thing I would note is that the company is on a path to profitability, and we are a self-sustaining company that's been doing work for 8 years. This is not an idea that is on a whiteboard. We really feel like we have the horse by the mane, and there's something really big here. In terms of talking to other investors, especially ESG investors, we have a ton of appetite. I would say that one thing that I hope a positive silver lining that comes out of this is the way we think about venture, especially for female-led companies. Only 2% of venture dollars in the past year have gone to female-led companies, and that's shrunk year over year. And I really want to put some emphasis here in saying that female-led companies are no less, the ideas are no smaller, and our ability to execute is no less. And I think that there's a huge arbitrage opportunity for backing female founders, and especially in this space. And I believe that the future of living will require lots of collaboration across many different companies, and that's the new form of disruption, especially where we require so much change across so many stakeholders in a very complicated value chain.
Jess, I'd love to give you a chance to weigh in on this question as well. Obviously, we know that women are historically underfunded in Silicon Valley, have a much harder time raising money, and here we have, idea aside, a controversial male founder getting a very big check. What sort of feelings, what was your reaction to that number?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's a great point, and it's certainly not lost on us. I think the positive sort of view of it is it's time for a lot of investment to go into this space, and this is raising the awareness and the visibility of housing and the rental residential real estate market as an opportunity. And I think that size of check, particularly from Andreessen Horowitz, which is a terrific company, really validates that market and puts a spotlight on what I think hasn't been as visible previously. So I think Marcela spoke to some of the other elements of it, but if we kind of look into the future, we can take that as a benefit for sure.
Obviously, both of you have worked very closely with Ms. Newman in this company and sort of over that period of time in the relationship. Now looking at him starting his own business in the space, whether or not it competes directly with what you guys do, what is it going to take for Flow to be successful in this market as it comes in as a new entrant?
I think, as with any business entering a market, it really comes down to understanding the customer. And when we started Alfred, we started by focusing on the resident and focusing on the way that we could impact their life and give back time past the front door of their home. And that's how we really built the company, by listening to what does a resident need, what does a consumer need in the housing market, and how can we begin to deliver that? And I think that is going to be true of all businesses entering this space, and probably not only just for the resident, but how can we make the operators, the folks that work in these buildings, lives easier? How can we elevate all of the attention in this space just for the benefit of everyone? And listening and really thinking from the consumer perspective and the customer perspective, I think, is critical for that.
So bigger picture, obviously, we are battling inflation. You've got consumers under pressure. We are potentially going into a recession. How do you assess how many people are going to want to pay more for the kind of services you provide? Do you see this as a luxury or a necessity? Marcelo, I'll let you take that.
So I think the really important thing that we are doing is it's not about increasing rent prices. It's about how do we do things more efficiently? How do we use technology to automate processes, to anticipate needs, to deliver services that allow new revenue to come into the building, and effectively increasing the size of the pie, not just by asking the resident to pay more. And we really think that, as you've seen, the rental prices and increases to the rental housing market have been so extreme, and there has not been a subsequent increase in the value proposition. You're still getting those four walls. And what we believe is fundamentally people want to rent a lifestyle and rent a home, and that we can provide that with putting our technology in, staffing these buildings a little bit differently, training people to hotel standards, moving property management from a focus on maintenance and rent collection and trash collection to really, how do we make a resident's life fantastic? How do we build a community? How do we make people feel a sense of place and a sense of home? So it's not just about how do we jack up the rent prices, it's how do we serve the consumer in a better way.